The grand estate of Hawthorne Manor stood on the edge of a quiet English village, its stone walls rising tall against the cloudy skies. From the outside, the mansion appeared majestic, an image of wealth and timeless prestige. Yet, behind its tall windows and heavy oak doors, silence lingered like a ghost. For years, the atmosphere inside had grown heavy, a hush so constant it seemed to settle into the very walls. The lady of the house, Eleanor Hawthorne, once filled the rooms with laughter and the gentle notes of her piano. She had been the heart of the home, the one who made its cold corridors feel warm. But everything changed after the accident that stole her hearing. Music, once her greatest joy, was replaced with an endless void. The silence she lived in wasn't just external, it was inside her as well. Her husband, Richard Hawthorne, a powerful and wealthy businessman, spent more time in bustling cities than at home. His life was consumed by international meetings and endless flights. To outsiders, he was a picture of success, a man admired for his ambition and accomplishments. But success came at a price. He could not face what waited for him at Hawthorne Manor. A wife who no longer smiled, and children who slowly withdrew into themselves. Their two children, Sophia, 14, and Daniel, 10, learned to live around their mother's silence. They whispered to each other in the hallways, unsure of how to reach her. The soundlessness frightened them. They felt that speaking to her was like speaking into a void. Over time, they stopped trying. Eleanor, hurt by their distance, eventually stopped trying to. She had grown weary of failed attempts and the constant reminder that the world around her had moved on without her. The mansion became a house of shadows, where each person lived in their own private isolation. To the villagers passing by, the estate symbolized wealth and happiness, but the truth was starkly different. Inside those walls lived a woman gazing blankly at the garden trees, a man who buried himself in late-night work to avoid guilt, and children who carried unspoken fears. It was into this fractured world that Amara Collins arrived. Amara was a young woman from Birmingham, known for her warmth and quiet strength. Her presence seemed to light up any space she entered. She had dark curls that framed her face, keen eyes that noticed every detail, and a smile that disarmed even the coldest stranger. Richard had hired her as a live-in nanny and house helper, thinking only of his children's practical needs. What he didn't realize was that her arrival would stir change in every corner of the house. Unbeknownst to the family, Amara was fluent in British Sign Language, growing up with a younger brother who had been deaf from birth. She had learned early how to communicate through hands and expressions. For her, sign language was not just a set of gestures, but a window into another way of seeing the world. On her very first day at the manor, Amara noticed something others ignored. While most of the staff tiptoed past Eleanor as though she were a silent statue, Amara stopped. She found Eleanor seated in the sunroom, a book resting idly on her lap. Eleanor wasn't truly reading. Her pale fingers barely turned the pages, her eyes glazed with the weight of years. Her posture told a story of surrender, shoulders hunched slightly forward, lips pressed into a line that spoke of resignation. Unlike the others, Amara did not avert her gaze or whisper pity behind Eleanor's back. She approached slowly, careful not to startle her, and when she reached her, she gently touched Eleanor's arm to signal her presence. Then, with calm certainty, her hands moved gracefully in the air. "Hello, my name is Amara. It's a pleasure to meet you." Eleanor froze. For a moment, she thought she had imagined it. Her wide eyes blinked rapidly. Her lips parted in disbelief. Years had passed since anyone had addressed her in her own language. Most had shouted clumsy words at her, as if her ears were broken, but her mind was too. The memory of such treatment had wounded her dignity again and again. But here stood this stranger, confidently bridging the gap with signs that were fluent and respectful. Eleanor's hands trembled as she hesitated, unsure if she even remembered how to respond. Slowly, awkwardly, she signed back, "My name is Eleanor." The movements were rusty and clumsy, but Amara's smile beamed as though she had been given a priceless treasure. That expression alone made Eleanor's chest tighten. For the first time in years, she felt truly seen. From that moment, something shifted. Amara and Eleanor began spending time together daily. In the mornings, Amara joined Eleanor in the garden, kneeling beside her in the soil as they planted flowers. Their conversations unfolded silently in the air, Amara teaching her new signs and Eleanor rediscovering the joy of dialogue. When Eleanor fumbled with a word, Amara corrected her gently. never mocking her mistakes, but celebrating her efforts. In the afternoons, they moved to the kitchen. Amara animatedly told stories from her childhood through science, her hands dancing with dramatic flair, her expression so lively that Eleanor often burst into silent laughter. At first, she tried to suppress it, covering her mouth as though laughter was forbidden in that house. But Amara encouraged it, clapping her hands with delight whenever Eleanor allowed her joy to escape. For the first time since her accident, Hawthorne Manor echoed, not with sound, but with life. The corridors felt warmer, the rooms less hollow. Even the staff sensed the change, moving about with lighter steps. But the greatest change was in the children. Sophia, the teenager, remained hesitant at first. She often lingered at doorways, pretending to scroll through her phone while secretly watching her mother's newfound brightness. She struggled with emotions she couldn't name, guilt, curiosity, and fear all tangled together. It had been so long since she had seen her mother smile like that. Daniel, on the other hand, approached with the fearless curiosity of a child. One afternoon, he walked into the kitchen and tugged gently on Amara's sleeve. "Can you show me how to say thank you?" he asked, eyes wide with determination. His small fingers struggled to copy hers, clumsy but earnest. Eleanor's heart swelled as she watched. That single word, thank you, was more than politeness. It was a bridge, however fragile, reaching toward her. Day by day, both children leaned in. Sophia eventually asked how to sign "I love you." Daniel practiced spelling his name with his hands. With every new sign, a wall cracked open. Slowly, the distance that had long divided them began to shrink. While bonds within the household began to shift, one person remained on the outside, Richard. He noticed small changes here and there. The staff seemed less burdened. The children appeared lighter, and even the air of the home felt less suffocating. But Richard did not allow himself to linger on these details. Instead, he buried himself deeper in work. He had convinced himself long ago that endless meetings and long flights were acts of love, that financial security was enough to hold a family together. In truth, he was terrified. To look Eleanor in the eyes meant confronting the years he had stolen from her with his absence. It meant facing the silence that had grown not just in her world, but in their marriage. Guilt sat heavy on his shoulders, and avoiding her became easier than enduring the weight of his failures. But avoidance could not last forever. One evening, Richard returned from London later than expected. His tie hung loose around his neck. His briefcase dangled from his tired hand. He walked through the familiar hallways, expecting the same quiet stillness that always greeted him. Yet something felt different. There was no sound, of course. There rarely was, but there was a vibration in the air, a faint thump against the floorboards, as though life itself was stirring. Curious, he set his briefcase down and followed the sensation. When he pushed open the kitchen door, the sight before him froze him in place. Eleanor was dancing, not stiff, mechanical movements, but fluid, joyful dancing. Her hair had slipped from its knee bun, tumbling around her face as she twirled. Her cheeks were flushed, her eyes alive with a light he hadn't seen in years. Beside her, Amara clapped her hands rhythmically, guiding Eleanor with silent laughter. As her bare feet skimmed the tiled floor, Richard's breath caught in his throat. He couldn't remember the last time he had seen Eleanor look so radiant. For years, she had been a shadow of the woman he married, locked in sorrow and silence. And yet here she was, alive, free, beautiful. His chest tightened with painful clarity. He had never once tried to bring her this joy. Instead, another woman had walked into their home and given Eleanor what he had denied her for years. Connection, companionship, understanding, a title. Wave of guilt crashed over him. At that moment, the children appeared behind him. Drawn by the faint vibrations of movement, Sophia and Daniel peeked past their father. Their eyes widened at the sight of their mother spinning in the middle of the kitchen. Sophia's hand flew to her mouth as tears gathered in her eyes. She had almost forgotten her mother could look like that. Not tired, not broken, but alive. Daniel whispered, voice trembling, "She's happy." Those words pierced Richard like a blade. Eleanor turned then and saw them all standing in the doorway. For a heartbeat, her smile faltered. Embarrassment flickered across her face. As though she had been caught breaking a rule, she looked like a child discovered sneaking sweets. But Amara stepped closer, laying a hand on Eleanor's shoulder. Her eyes steady and reassuring. "Don't hide." The silence that followed was unbearable. No one moved, no one spoke. It was Sophia who broke first. Trembling, Her voice cracked as she whispered, "Mom, I'm sorry." Eleanor's hands twitched at her sides, her face softening in confusion. Then Daniel rushed forward, his small arms wrapping tightly around his mother's waist. His body shook with sobs as he cried, "We didn't mean to make you feel alone." Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. She bent down and clutched him, holding him so tightly it seemed she would never let go. Sophia soon followed, throwing her arms around both of them. Together, they wept, grief, regret, and love pouring out all at once. Richard stood frozen, shame twisting inside him. His throat burned as he tried to find words. Any words. Finally, he stepped into the kitchen, his voice unsteady. "Eleanor," he whispered, "I failed you. I thought keeping myself busy would protect me from the pain, but all I did was hurt you. Please, forgive me." His hands trembled as he tried to sign the words he had learned years ago in a class. He never continued. The signs were broken, clumsy, but Eleanor understood. Tears streamed down her face as she reached up and touched his cheek, her fingers trembling with forgiveness. But it wasn't just Richard who needed to make amends. Sophia and Daniel cried too, realizing that their fear had built walls between them and their mother. Now, for the first time, they wanted to tear them down. Richard turned to Amara, his eyes heavy with both shame and hope. "Please," he said softly, teach us her language. We don't deserve it, but we want to try. We want to talk to her again." The children nodded eagerly, desperation in their teary faces. "Please, Amara," Sophia whispered, "help us fix this." Amara's own eyes shimmered as she watched them. Slowly, she nodded. Her hands moved with gentle firmness as she signed, "Yes, but this isn't about fixing. This is about love, and love takes work." Eleanor's tears continued to fall, but now her smile broke through. For the first time in years, she saw her family not walking away from her, but reaching toward her. That night, in the very kitchen where silence once suffocated them, the family gathered together. The wealthy businessman, his children, and the once overlooked wife sat with the young woman who had become more than a nanny. Amara began teaching them simple signs. "Hello, thank you, I love you." The children giggled at their own mistakes, Daniel fumbling with his fingers, Sophia stiff with nerves. Richard, though clumsy, repeated each sign with fierce determination. Eleanor watched, her heart breaking and mending at the same time. For the first time in so many years, she felt not invisible, but present, not abandoned, but heard. Even in silence in the weeks that followed, Hawthorne Manor transformed. The cold, distant halls where silence once reigned became places of connection. At mealtimes, the family practiced signing between bites of food. Conversations, though slow and sometimes awkward, were filled with effort and warmth. Car rides turned into little lessons. Sophia signed jokes she picked up online, her stiff hands loosening with practice. Daniel proudly showed off every new word he learned, grinning each time. His mother's eyes lit up with pride. And Richard, the man who had once drowned himself in business meetings, stayed present. He stumbled often, his fingers unsure, but he kept trying. That determination alone was enough to soften the scars that silence had left behind. Eleanor, once a prisoner of her isolation, blossomed again. She began spending more time with her children, teaching them her favorite songs through sign language, though no sound filled the air. Daniel clapped along enthusiastically while Sophia translated the rhythm into movements of her hands. Richard, too, joined, his mistakes earning laughter instead of frustration. For Eleanor, each moment was proof that love had not been lost, only waiting to be found again. Amara remained at the heart of it all. No longer just a caretaker, she became the bridge that held the family together. She reminded them gently that love is not measured by perfection, but by effort. She taught them that communication is not about words alone, but about presence, patience, and vulnerability. Months later, Richard found himself standing once again in the kitchen where everything had changed. But this time, the scene was different. It wasn't Amara guiding Eleanor in a dance, it was Sophia, twirling her mother with careful but joyful steps, while Daniel clapped out a rhythm on the counter. Eleanor's laughter, silent but unmistakable, filled the room. Her hands moved rapidly as she signed encouragement, her eyes shining brighter than ever before. Richard didn't hesitate this time. He stepped forward, reaching for Eleanor's hand. His movements were clumsy, his feet unsure, but she welcomed him. Together, they swayed across the kitchen floor, Tears blurred his vision, but he didn't care. For the first time in years, he was not just watching from the sidelines. He was part of her world again. Eleanor looked up at him, her gaze steady. In that moment, she didn't see the man who had abandoned her in silence. She saw the husband, who had finally returned. Sophia and Daniel joined them, circling around their parents with laughter. Amara clapped from the corner, her smile wide and proud. The air pulsed with life, not from sound, but from the rhythm of love rediscovered. The lesson was clear. Silence could break a family, but silence could also be bridged. Love did not require perfect words, only hearts willing to reach for one another. That night, as the children fell asleep and the manor settled into a peaceful hush, Richard stood by the window, watching the garden sway under the moonlight. He whispered to himself, a vow only he could hear, never again. He had finally understood that the most dangerous silence is not the one that comes from loss of hearing, but the one that grows between people who stop trying to connect. And as long as he lived, he would never let that silence return. The story of Hawthorne Manor was no longer one of isolation and sorrow. It had become a story of redemption, patience, and the extraordinary power of love spoken in every form, even without sound.